9 months ago, I went to the Netherlands, and I'm finally making a video about it. After consuming copious amounts of Netherlands good content on YouTube, aka just talking about good urbanism, I was excited to actually just go and see it myself and experience it. And it really was that good. As an urbanist, I've heard my fair share of comments like, North America is different. That will never work here. Which is partially true, but in a kinda sorta way. In this video, I'll be sharing my trip, as well as doing some compare and contrast between the Netherlands and Canada, but more specifically Calgary, the region of Canada in which I live. And of course, all of this is going to be through an urbanist's lens. So let's get started with the trip. Conveniently, there are flights offered from Calgary directly to Amsterdam. Also convenient, I'm not very tall, so the flight was at least reasonably comfortable for me. And the flight is where we first see the contrast. This is what I saw as we left Calgary. And as we descend below the clouds here, you'll notice how different the Netherlands is. I mean, a beach? Please find Calgary on a map and direct me to the nearest oceanside beach. I'll save you the trouble. It's about 1,000 kilometers away and an 11-hour drive in Vancouver, British Columbia. And now check out these canals. These farming areas look a little different from the farms back home, just a little. First contrast, we have totally different climates. We get different amounts of rain, we have different growing seasons, and we get different levels of sun too. Not to mention the difference in elevation. This difference in climate definitely impacts our ability to just do what the Dutch do. I mean, especially considering that they get tons of rain, meaning they can't bike everywhere. Wait, we're the ones who don't bike everywhere, even though Calgary gets 333 days of sunshine? Oh. Apparently, with regards to sunshine at least, it would actually be easier to do what the Dutch do, at least in Calgary. And of course, it gets much colder here, and I mean like much colder, and we do get more snow. And our cities have been built to be hostile to those getting around by walking or wheeling, but that last one is a choice we can change. And the first two, cold and snow, well, we can dress for that. And besides, with better built cities, getting around wouldn't take so long anyways. After arriving in Amsterdam, we waited for our bus, and I stood in awe of the amount of bike parking. Of course, I was amazed by the cycling infrastructure, but something I didn't expect to be amazed by was the roads. Oh my goodness, these look like they were freshly paved. I imagine wear and tear is lighter on Dutch highways, not because they're less car dependent, because their highways seem just as busy to me, but rather because of lighter vehicles combined with a climate that's gentler on pavement. During the week I'm making this video, we're dipping below minus 30 degrees Celsius. If you're watching this on the first few days this video is released, just look up Calgary's temperature right now. It's freezing here. Whereas the coldest temperature ever recorded in the Netherlands was minus 27.4, and that was recorded in 1942, 82 years ago. It doesn't just get cold here either. We get rapid temperature swings. These swings are thanks to Chinook winds, warm western winds that can blow up to 100 kilometers an hour. Once in Pincher Creek, Alberta, these winds caused the temperature to rise from minus 19 to plus 22 in an hour. That's going from snow pants to shorts in an hour. An hour! Not only are these freeze-thaw cycles rough on our roads, but the way we deal with climate is too. Salt, gravel, sand, studded tires, snow plows, and more all add to the wear and tear. But something else I should note is that the Netherlands has less asphalt per capita than we do in Calgary. Our road budget is stretched thin and would benefit from alternative transportation options. Having other options would allow us to keep our roads just a little bit nicer. So obviously, climate is a big deal when you're talking about building cycling infrastructure, and when you're talking about using cycling infrastructure. If you want to check out a great video on cycling in the winter, make sure you check out Oh the Urbanity's video. I'll probably link a few because they've done a few on this topic, and I think they do great things. So from Amsterdam, we drove all the way down south to Veere. When we got there, to fight the jet lag, a couple friends and I rented bikes and biked to Belgium. Up to this point, I'd only ever been to Canada and the US, which, to be fair, are big places, but I figured I should tick off an easy win and double the number of countries I'd been to. Also, now I can say I biked to Belgium. I mean, it's not a lie, but yeah, okay, my starting point was just barely across the border. The next day, we headed into town. Veere is a city of 50,000 people. I'd never heard anything about it before visiting, so I was excited to visit what I assume is just a normal Dutch town. I enjoyed seeing the bike lanes. I also loved the raised crosswalks or continuous sidewalks. These are a simple way to prioritize people, and it's definitely something we can do here in Canada. In fact, we've already done it in some places. It's just not as common as it should be. Now, let's come back to this intersection. Here, you'll find a variety of people using a variety of modes to get around. You see a parent with children, an elderly person on a mobility scooter, several people riding their Dutch-style bikes, someone walking, and a bunch of people in cars. And, while this seems very chaotic, everyone is moving at a slow speed, making eye contact, watching for signals, and taking their turn to get through the intersection, following the right-of-way rules laid out here. So is this something we can import to Canada? Well, kinda maybe. We can't exactly import driving habits, but I do have a few suggestions we could put into effect to encourage intermodal communication. For one, transportation education programs that include several modes, not just driving. We could have stricter driver training tests, which is something I think we all agree on. Better designed intersections would also go a very long way, and smaller vehicles and fewer tinted windows so people driving can more easily communicate with other road users. Of course, while there, I enjoyed the walkable streets. Looking back on the footage, it seems kinda empty here. That is, until you count the people. I figured there are about 12 people here, and it's quiet. If all these people were in cars, there'd be about 8 cars trying to get through here right now. And it's not like cars can't be here. Deliveries have to be made, emergencies happen, repairs may be needed, and some of the residents have cars too. These retractable bollards are definitely something we could implement in Canada. These help keep quiet residential or walkable streets from getting overrun by car traffic. And in general, we could definitely do with more walkable streets. Calgary already has one permanent pedestrian street, and there are several others that are like this at least some of the time. And Banff has been doing a great job at this as well, and I hope they'll continue on that route. People like being places like this, so why not do more? Another thing I really appreciated in the Netherlands, which I wasn't expecting to, were the church towers found in every town or city we visited. The tower in Veere was especially prominent and helped me find my way around. In Calgary, we have a pretty decent skyline, but it's not visible from everywhere in the city, and of course the city is too big to use all of downtown for wayfinding. I also don't think we should just build clock towers in all of our neighborhoods, but I also don't not think that. I do like the idea of having interesting markers to help us get around, though I suppose signposts and our phones work pretty well. Speaking of wayfinding, it was cool to see these posts identifying different cycling routes, as well as horse routes, and at a junction to be able to see an entire map of the region's major cycling routes. In Calgary, we have these posts around much of our city helping cyclists find their way. They're pretty useful since they point you in the direction of different things. I've used them in my own wayfinding, but to be able to see a complete layout would be pretty nice. Definitely something we can take from the Dutch. And I'd love to say something about local transit, but I didn't take any while I was there. So I guess I'll just have to go back. Something I noticed was how much the boulevards were allowed to grow here as well. In Calgary, it's all mowed, but I'm hoping we start growing more native grasses here. You'll notice this crosswalk is set back from the intersection. This allows for increased visibility, and is something we already see in some places in Calgary, though once again this is another thing that has yet to be made standard. That's an easy design choice to adopt, as is this next one. Or should I say these next few? First things first, nearsighted traffic signals. This prevents people from stopping their cars on the crosswalk. Stopping on a crosswalk can reduce pedestrian visibility, make it difficult for people pushing a stroller or pulling a cart to cross, or make it impossible altogether for someone using a mobility aid like a wheelchair to cross at all. The way nearsighted signals help is by making it so you can't see the light if you're pulled over the stop line. I think these should be adopted immediately. And if you're thinking, that's too complicated, it's not practical, people can't understand something new, well, I've got news for you. We've already got these in Canada. And they work really well. Believe it or not, people understand stop on red and go on green. In Canmore, Alberta, you'll find a well-done Dutch-style intersection. It's complete with infrastructure for walkers, wheelers, and drivers. And even in Calgary, we have examples of nearsighted traffic signals. Though not a full intersection, this special turn signal applies itself in the same way. A couple more quick ones here. Sensors that keep traffic flowing and buttons to let cyclists and pedestrians through. As some contrast to the situation for cyclists in Calgary, at this intersection, 14th Street and Heritage Drive Southwest, cyclists are supposed to go from here to here, but this crosswalk is closed, and this light only turns green when activated by the sensor found here. But cyclists aren't heavy enough to activate it. So if you're riding a bicycle, you can wait for a car to activate the green light, or you can take the time to cross this way, then this way, then this way. Or you could run the red light if there aren't cars filling up the runtime of this green light. Of course, that's illegal and super, super dangerous, but also that's what the situation is encouraging. And if you're wondering why cyclists don't just ride on the other side, well, that's a sidewalk, which is illegal to ride on. Anyways, back to the Netherlands. Next was a day trip to Delft, which included a canal tour. It was great seeing and learning about the historic buildings. We also saw the world's tiniest museum. I enjoyed seeing the new building happening alongside the old. And at the Royal Delft, I especially enjoyed the embrace of traditions and the preservation of craft. And of course, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know how much I love windows and seeing behind the scenes at museums. Well, here you can walk through the factory itself. That was pretty cool. Definitely a highlight of the trip. But back on the canal, I thought the way they do construction, restoration, and repairs using these barges was super cool. And then to wrap up our day in Delft, we wandered around a little bit more before leaving. On the way out of Delft, I saw these tram tracks and a tram or two on there, and some of the tracks were even grassy, which of course we love. Now we're back to the compare and contrast part of this video. In Calgary, we have a light rail, and a pretty good one at that, the second busiest in North America. The C train, as we call it, is a high-floor light rail train. There are 2 lines with 45 stations and 60 kilometers of track. And in 2022, the C train carried almost 62 million passengers. Now, I didn't ride the Delft trams, so I can't say much for them. What I will say is I'm looking forward to the continued development of Calgary's transit network with the building of the Green Line, construction on which begins this year. Back in Veere, we sang at a Liberation Day ceremony. Oh yeah, this was a choir trip, by the way. We came to the Netherlands to sing for their Liberation Day because it was largely Canadian soldiers who liberated the Dutch during World War II. Now, that's where I'm going to leave things for today. I am already working on part 2 of this. It will be out at least next week, maybe sooner if I get it done. You'll want to make sure you're subscribed for that video when it comes out because next week we're taking a train trip to another city, to Antwerp.